That's right. The room is empty. There's nothing at this time to show you. What I am going to show you is a series of scenes from the movie, and in each scene I'll describe the clues that I pulled out of that scene that got me to draw the ship the way I did. That way you can follow along and see if you line up with me. In this picture, we get that Dr. Carrington is explaining to the captain that the high-speed photos that they took of the object as it entered the Earth's atmosphere clearly showed that the object went upward, making it not a meteor. This is kind of important. First, it kind of eliminates the War of the World meteor thing crashing down and creating a large crater. It tells us, very importantly, that the craft, when going in forward motion, has upward mobility. It's under power. This is the crew headed out to the landing site of the object. As you can see in the background, there's a little yellow light which in the movie is blinking. That indicates, of course, that's probably a Geiger counter and indicates radioactivity. It's really no big surprise. The craft was atomic powered. Here we have Dr. Carrington explaining to one and all what he believes happened. He believes that the craft landed at the far end of the bottleneck, slid forward by momentum, and then the engine or engines melted the patch of ice there and the saucer sank. This is a critical piece of the puzzle about the saucer. First of all, it's not magnetic, it's not gravimetric. If it had been, it would have hovered, landed, maybe it would have melted through the ice, but it would have just been a target. It would have been a spot, a round circle. You wouldn't have had the bottleneck. The bottleneck indicates that the craft, in order to stay aloft, needed forward momentum. Very important in the design. This is more like a plane or a rocket. Here's the only concrete piece of evidence that we have. It's the vertical stabilizer, and this dictates a lot from this point forward. First of all, it brings into play avionics. The saucer has to have some avionics to some degree to stay aloft. They put a vertical stabilizer on it. Next, it absolutely dictates it's a single direction craft. That is, it isn't going to hover, it isn't going to back up, it isn't going to go left, it isn't going to go right. This thing is designed to go forward, and that's what it's going to be set up for. Here they're trying to determine the shape of the craft as seen through the ice. It's blurry, but they come to the conclusion that OMG, it's a circle. They've discovered a flying saucer. Through the ice, they can see no doors, no windows, nothing that looks like an engine. The only piece that they have staring them in the face is that vertical stabilizer. Here is the scene where they released the thermite bombs. The bombs burned for a few minutes, and that was followed by a large explosion. As we're all educated now in the 21st century, we know that uranium does not explode, right? Except under very unique conditions, and burning a thermite bomb isn't going to do it. So it burnt, and then it blew up something else. I believe it blew up the fuel supply of the ship, and we'll get into that. Looking through the ice and down onto the saucer, this is what the men would have seen. A simple smooth disc. No doors, no windows, no engines, just the vertical fuselage. Okay, right here we're going to rotate the ship continuously so that you can get a complete view of it all the way around. First off, you'll notice that there are no doors, no windows anywhere. And that as you look straight down the ship, you'll notice that I bent almost a third of the saucer down at a slight angle. I did that for avionics. Avionics? Yes, remember we agreed that it had to have avionics. And what I do is I create a slight compression of the air as it travels from the nose to the rear. This is very similar to the Valkyrie supersonic plane of the 60s and 70s, which was discontinued by the United States, but it'll give it a certain amount of lift. It also creates some avionics so that the thing will be a little more stable. One of the last things you'll notice is that as the saucer comes around, you'll see in the rear um, the two atomic powered engines. You can see the little yellow as it goes by. I suppose the engine fire and stuff like that. But you notice that it's smooth. It runs all the way to the rear. It blends in with the body. Um, that way it meets all the criteria of the movie. Uh, One of the clips showed that the ship was atomic powered, and I always start with the power unit of the ship because that's usually everything builds off of that. So what you have here is the two gray cylinders in the center are the atomic reactors, and just to give you a rough size, that's about a 12-foot diameter cylinder there. They come down to exhaust pipes, and the exhaust pipes go out the bottom of the ship, and they blend into the bottom of the ship, so there's no tubes hanging out. It's a flush fit. The bronze tanks on each side are a liquefied hydrogen, and the silver cylinders attaching each tank to the reactor are the pumps for that. Now, liquefied hydrogen, remember the explosion from the thermite bombs? Well, it is my feeling that these bronze containers melted, and the explosion was the residual left in the tanks after the landing was completed. Now, up front, you'll see four sort of pseudo radar dishes. Since the ship had no windows of any kind, I placed those up front, and I figured they would build him a digitized landscape of his approach as he needed it. Here are several containers within the ship. The gold one is for the pilot. As we saw from the movie, the pilot could easily be frozen and defrosted with no special equipment. My guess is he was put in his container frozen hard, flew the entire trip from Mars to Earth, and then defrosted just before he hit the atmosphere. Now I'll show you the containers for the liquid freezing and the oxygen bottles to defrost him. This makes the ship very simple. Also, I feel this craft is a one-way mission. He's coming to Earth. He's never going to return. His goal in life is to create an army, to set up colonization, and then somehow contact Mars and let them know that they can send additional ships. Now, the containers probably contain handheld weapons that he could use and his offspring. But mostly, it's set up as an agricultural site. That is, he's going to set up tents with water, warm conditions, things like that, so he could raise them, so he could grow his army of Martian soldiers. And he's probably going to grow thousands. I'm going to show you blood containers, things like that. Um, we're going to have seeds in various stages of maturing so that he could create this army and take over the world. Visible now are the sphere-shaped cylinders which provided the liquid material to keep them frozen, and just below those are the cylinder-shaped containers for the warm oxygen to defrost them. Obviously, the red containers, a little obvious, contain blood, a nutrient necessary to raise the young. The blue container that you see there contained the seeds for the offspring. I'm sure he wasn't going to take his hand, cut it open, and spread seeds all over the ground, right? He's going to bring seeds that are in various stages of maturing, place them in the dirt, some of which he may have brought with himself in a tent that he will have constructed. This is looking straight down onto the pilot's chair. I made the top piece clear so that you could see through it, but normally it's made of the same material that the capsule is made out of. As you can see, he has a small amount of cush there. It's not very thick. They weren't into creature comforts. On each side, you'll find a small control panel. It is just there for the controlling of the thrust in the engines of the plane so that he can land the plane. At rest, sitting down, he has at the end of each hand two flight control sticks, one on each side, which gives him control of the saucer for approach. Not shown here directly above his head, so he doesn't lift it at all. Looking straight up, he'll find a series of small monitors that display digital output of the landscape as he's approaching, probably critical information, altitude, wind drift, anything he could possibly need to land the plane. But it's very simple and straightforward. It's just enough to get him on the ground. The plane's almost junked at that point. The I would imagine that the atomic reactors he could still use to power the tents and stuff like that where he'd be growing his young to keep them warm up in the northern area. The silver balls again are the refrigerant material. The brass tubes on each side there, the capsules, are his fresh oxygen. Last is the frame of the structure, the support of the saucer keeps the tanks apart. The tanks, of course, will have their own internal structure to have them hold their shapes. But you can see here that the ship is built with a ladder back type structure. You can see that that's reinforced a great deal around the atomic reactors, which have got to just be very, very heavy. So the extra reinforcement went in through there. The saucer comes complete with a single skid landing gear that comes down out of the middle. If you take a look, the skid itself is about 5 foot wide and about 40 feet long. The ship comes in, balances on that, and actually it retracts to some degree, leaving just the center skid and then the two tips of the saucer to rest on the ground. That concludes our tour of the saucer from The Thing from Another World, the 1951 version. I hope you enjoyed the artwork, hope you enjoyed the pictures. I hope you agreed with my conclusions, and if you didn't, write me.